Welcome to the video tidbit on aerobic respiration. Aerobic respiration, sometimes known as cellular respiration, is a difficult concept, but it's the #1 key concept in biology. Without aerobic respiration, we wouldn't have any life because the energy that comes from the sun is converted in the process of photosynthesis. But in photosynthesis, we make carbohydrates, which we take in from plants, and then we have to break those down as animals using respiration for our nutrition. So we have to have this process every second of every day, or else our cells wouldn't survive. When we look at the process of aerobic respiration, we start the journey with glucose. Now this could also be a protein instead of glucose, which is a sugar. It could even be pieces of fat. But we look at the process of glucose because glucose is kind of the standard. So whether it's a protein or glucose or fat, it's going to follow the same kinds of processes. One of the things to notice about glucose is that there are 6 carbon atoms, and you can see those are in black, 6 oxygen atoms, and 12 hydrogen atoms. Now what we want are not these atoms, because if we keep the atoms of every molecule of glucose that we eat, we're going to end up gaining weight very quickly because we would keep all of that mass. What we don't realize a lot of times is that these atoms leave our body. Carbon will leave as carbon dioxide. We breathe it out. We take it in as a solid, but we get rid of it as a gas. And a lot of times, since that gas is invisible, we don't think of breaking down sugar and releasing it and breathing it out. Most people, if you ask them how they get rid of the molecules or the atoms in the sugar they eat, would probably say it's in the feces, and that's not true. You breathe it out through your lungs. So we'll look at how that process occurs. What we want is the energy that's holding the bonds between all of these atoms, those 24 atoms you see on the screen. What we want is the energy holding those together. That's what fuels our muscles. That's what allows us to carry out metabolism. We want the energy. We don't want the atoms. So we're going to need to get rid of those atoms. The first step that glucose goes through is called glycolysis. In glycolysis, we're going to take that glucose molecule and we're going to split it in half. The molecules that result are called pyruvates. Sometimes you'll see them referred to as pyruvic acids. The difference is not one that we're going to worry about right now. So we take the glucose, we break it down by glycolysis into 2 pyruvic acid molecules. As the bonds are broken, some of the hydrogens are going to be released. We're going to break some of the bonds. Remember, we want the energy from the bonds. We don't want the atoms. We want to get rid of the carbon. We want to get rid of the oxygen. We want to get rid of the hydrogen. We don't want to keep those atoms because that would increase our body mass. What we want is the energy from the bonds that's holding them together that was put there through the process of photosynthesis coming from the sunlight. So the energy that's holding those molecules together originally came from the sun, and it got put there through photosynthesis. We want to take it out. The next thing that's going to happen is that as we break those bonds, some of the hydrogens are going to be released, and those hydrogens will attach to a shuttle bus. Now that shuttle bus is a molecule. Obviously it's not a bus running around our cells. It's a molecule called NAD, and the NAD is built on niacin, which is a B vitamin. So the niacin shuttle bus, which is a molecule called NAD, is going to pick up those hydrogens and it's going to take them off to the electron transport system. Now as those bonds are broken, the molecules are rearranged. That means we have energy that was put there from the sun that is being released. What we do is we make ATP from that energy. Now to make ATP, we're taking a molecule that was ADP, we're just attaching a phosphate group to the end of it. To attach that, to form that chemical bond, we have to have energy. That energy came from breaking those bonds we saw a second ago and attaching that energy from those chemical bonds into the chemical bond that's going to form ATP. So we haven't made energy. When we say we make ATP, we're not making it from scratch. We're just taking the energy that originally belonged to the sun that was put into the glucose through photosynthesis. We're taking it and we're holding together an ATP molecule using that energy. Remember that when we break a bond, we're going to get two things. First, we get the energy that held the bond together. That's what's used to make the ATP. We're also going to get the atoms. Those we don't want. We want to get rid of those. Unless we're trying to build muscle or something like that, we don't want to increase our body mass. So we need to get rid of those atoms. The hydrogen atoms took off. We'll see them later. We'll come back to them. They're not going to be gone forever. But we're breaking this down bit by bit, keeping the energy, getting rid of the atoms. As we continue to break apart the molecules, we're going to take carbons and oxygens and we're going to release those as carbon dioxide. Remember, this came into our body as sugar, which is a solid. We're going to get rid of the bulk of these atoms as a gas. We don't see them leave our body. They are not part of our feces. What they are the breath that we breathe out every second. We're breathing out carbon atoms that we took in as food. So that's how those atoms leave our body. So the hydrogen atoms, again, are going to attach to the shuttle, and the carbon dioxide atoms we will breathe off. Now, hydrogen atoms have to attach to this shuttle because you can't just have hydrogen atoms floating around. Hydrogen atoms floating around would cause a decrease in pH. That could be fatal. We can't have a decrease in pH. Our body, blood, and fluids need to stay close to neutral. And an increase in hydrogens from breaking all these molecules apart would cause the pH to fall, and we can't have that to happen. So we have the shuttle bus they're going to attach to. Those will be taken off to the electron transport system. The carbon dioxides went away because we breathed them off out through the air. The molecules that are left are called acetyls, and they're going to be transported to the next step. So after the hydrogens leave, they go to the electron transport system. What's left, these acetyl groups, are going to go to Krebs cycle. Now, Krebs cycle is also called the tricarboxylic acid cycle. Krebs, biology is going away from naming things after people. So the Krebs cycle in newer books is referred to as the tricarboxylic acid cycle. Now, these acetyl molecules are small. They're going to need a carrier to transport them to Krebs cycle. So we get this carrier called coenzyme A, and it attaches to it. It's kind of like a tugboat. It's going to pull these molecules towards the Krebs cycle. When the coenzyme A drops off that molecule at the Krebs cycle, it's going to join with a molecule that's already there, and I like to think of it as oxaloacetate. This molecule is going around like a merry-go-round or a Ferris wheel. As it comes up to the acetyl molecule, it's going to pick them up. Acetyl is going to hitch a ride on the oxaloacetate. It's going to go through some changes as it goes through the cycle, and we're not going to worry about each step of the Krebs cycle, but it's going to go through some changes, and then when it gets back to where it started, it's going to be oxaloacetate again. So we'll see what happens. And then remember, don't worry about all the details of the Krebs cycle. If you take biochemistry, then you can worry about those details. But at this level, you don't have to worry about the details, just the stuff I'm going to show you here. So the acetyl molecule is going to come in. It's going to get dropped off at the oxaloacetate. Oxaloacetate has 4 carbons. Acetyl has 2 carbons. They're going to join together. Now you have a 6-carbon citric acid. So we had a 4-carbon oxaloacetate. Now we have a 6-carbon citric acid. That goes through the Krebs cycle. The hydrogen atoms, again, are going to be picked up by the NAD shuttle, transported to the electron transport system. Sometimes I have on here electron transport system, sometimes electron transport chain. Those are the same exact thing. It's just different in different books. So I kind of go back and forth, and they're interchangeable. So we took away the hydrogen atoms. They're going off to the electron transport system. We'll see those again later. The carbons that are left, the 2 black carbons, not the open circles, but the 2 original black carbons, those are going to pick up some oxygen from some water, and then they're going to be breathed off as carbon dioxide. So once those are breathed off as carbon dioxide, we've gotten rid of all of the atoms from that original molecule. Those were breathed off, not in the feces. We didn't gain weight. We breathe them off in the air we breathe out. I know they're small, and I know that's hard to conceptualize, that you take in a solid cube of sugar and you breathe all of the atoms out, but it's not the atoms that cause calories. We can't break apart atoms. That'd be a nuclear reaction. We would explode. What causes the calories are the bonds. So the bonds are what causes the energy and that we store. So we get rid of those carbon dioxides, we breathe those off, we transport the rest of those hydrogens that were left from the waters as are on the NAD bus, takes them to the electron transport system. Remember, there were 2 acetyls, so we have to go through the Krebs cycle twice. So the other acetyl is going to come in. We're going to break it down into carbon dioxide, and we'll go through that same process of taking those hydrogens out, taking them to the electron transport system. Okay, so we've completely gotten rid of all the carbons and oxygens that were in that original glucose. Now we bring back all these hydrogens, some of them from glycolysis, some of them from when we made the acetyl molecule, quite a few of them from the Krebs cycle. All of these hydrogens are dropped off at the mitochondria of the cell. So they all go into the interior of the mitochondria of the cell. Now we know by looking at diffusion, when we go from when we have something that's very highly concentrated, we will go from a high concentration to a low concentration. That doesn't take any energy, that's diffusion. That's what wants to happen. So sitting here in the middle of this mitochondria, you can see all these hydrogen atoms. They don't all want to be together. They want to get away from each other. So they're going to move down their concentration gradient. And as they move down their concentration gradient, it's like water behind a dam. And as they go down the concentration gradient, they're going to release energy, just like water going over a dam, and that energy can be used to make ATP. Just like water going over a dam can be used to make electricity. Now, not make it out of thin air, like I said, but provide the energy to attach the phosphate group on to the molecule to make ATP. This process is called chemiosmosis, and it occurs in the mitochondria. It's the main way, by far, that animal cells make their ATP, using this concentration gradient of hydrogens. Now, once that hydrogen's out in the mitochondria, we've got a big pH problem here. This pH is going to start to fall. We can't have that. We've got to deal with that. And so we have to get rid of that hydrogen. This is where the oxygen you breathe in comes in. It was not to make carbon dioxide. We saw carbon dioxide. We didn't have to bring in any oxygen to make carbon dioxide. We used a little bit of water, but not oxygen. The oxygen you breathe in comes in here at the level of the mitochondria, not to break down sugar. You can break down sugar without oxygen. That's no problem. But you can't have the electron transport chain without oxygen. That's where the problem comes in. Oxygen comes in, and oxygen's going to pick up these hydrogens and make water. Water's neutral. It doesn't disturb our pH. And water then takes care of those hydrogens, gets them out of the mitochondria. More hydrogens can come in, and it neutralizes the system. So we originally brought in a glucose. We broke it down into carbon dioxide that we breathed off, hydrogens that we brought to the electron transport system. Those hydrogens combine with oxygen to make water. So we brought in glucose. We get out water, energy, and carbon dioxide. This whole process, is known as cellular respiration. It occurs every second of every day in every living cell. And I know it's complicated and I know it's chemistry, but it is so crucial that if it stops, it's fatal. Something that stops it is cyanide. Cyanide will stop this process. It's up on the screen right there, that movement of hydrogen. Cyanide stops it. It's fatal instantly. This is something that has to happen every second. You cannot have a break in this. And that's why we look at it. Yes, it's complicated. Yes, it's going to take some time to get to understand. Yes, you're going to have to go through the website. You may have to watch this video over and over. You're going to have to read your book. But it's crucial. It's absolutely crucial. key concept in biology, so we have to look at it.